Okay, looks like everyone has had a chance to get in here. Welcome everyone to our, I guess, episode number 56 of the Tuesday night officiating program Zoomcast. Tonight's topic is dealing with game assigners, and very much appreciate everyone joining us tonight for what could be a very interesting discussion, and also appreciate the fact that, look, the season's winding down. We understand that many of you have a chance, or some of you may have a chance to put your skates away for the year, and we hope that you take advantage of that opportunity to get away for a little bit. But we do appreciate you joining us tonight and participating in our Zoomcast. For those that may not be aware, I'm Matt Leaf. I'm the director of the officiating program for USA Hockey, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Joining us tonight as a panelist is Krissy Langley, who brings 30 years or so of officiating experience in the Minnesota area. She is currently and recently was appointed as our referee-in-chief for female development back in, I guess, November, and has joined the referee section, or the official section, in that particular role, and will play an integral part of growing and creating a culture and an environment for our female officials that will be a very positive thing. So Krissy, thanks for joining us tonight. She's also spent the last several years as the referee-in-chief for the Women's Hockey Association in Minnesota, and we'll get into a little background on WHAM and where that fits in here in a second. Also joining us is Kevin Redding, who is our Connecticut State Supervisor of Officials, longtime 30+ years involved with USA Hockey. Working a variety of different levels, the American League, NCAA, internationally, including the 2006 Winter Olympic Games as a linesman in Torino, Italy. So thanks, Kevin, for joining us as well. As we generally do, we have a poll for you tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll questions so we can gather some important feedback from you. I believe there's 5 questions tonight, so go ahead and take your time, read through them, give us your best answer for each one, and after you've answered the 5, you can press submit, and we'll take a quick second here when you're done to review the results. Okay, let's take a look at the results real quick. Okay, so question number 1, how are game officials assigned in your local area? And basically 26%, and an independent officials game assigner. 58%, the majority is a local officials assigner, association assigner. 5% youth hockey club, and a couple of people that may not be a part of the officiating program and are not sure. Question number 2. Are the officials assigned using an online assignment product or an application? In this day and age, it's probably not a surprise to pretty much be yes. Everyone is using some sort of an electronic assigning process. The old days of calling games out on a phone on a Wednesday night or sending out a postcard with the assignments for the month looks like those days may be long gone. Question number 3. In general, how much advance notice are officials provided prior to their game assignments? About 16%, less than a week. Looks like the vast majority is somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks, so 10 days, 10 to 14 days at 63%. And about 16%, again, more than 2 weeks, which I'm assuming is kind of sort of a monthly type basis. Question number 4, are the officials assigners in your area compensated for their work? And if yes, who are they compensated by? Vast majority are paid by the local, 58% by the local teams and the clubs. 5% have a combination of the team, clubs, and also take a surplus or a surcharge from the officials. And 11%, 10% are not compensated. And again, about 25% just aren't sure about their local area. And question number 5, if the answer to the previous question is yes, roughly how much are they compensated on a per game basis? And less than $2, 5%, $2 to $4, 10%, 11. Looks like the little bit of majority is $4 to $6, somewhere in that range. 10% or so that are not compensated, and a whole bunch of I don't know. And I'm going to be honest with you there. That's a little scary in itself. And I'm sure that Krissy and Kevin may have some insight on that. But bottom line is again, thank you for that feedback. That is important for us. It is something that we do utilize and keep track of, and gives us a feel for what's happening out in the field there. Just a real quick reminder that if you do have any questions that you want to present to myself or the panelists tonight, please feel free to use the Q&A section, and we will be more than happy to try to answer as many of those questions as possible. So with that in mind, we thank you again very much, and let's get started with tonight's sessions. So, Krissy, going to start with you, and I guess the first question is maybe give us a little bit of background on WHAM, the Women's Hockey Association in Minnesota, what exactly your role was, and how many games officials are involved in that particular league each season.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. WHAM is what I would say, in what they claim is the largest women's hockey association in the world. It has approximately 100 teams, and there are 8 different divisions. And we have approximately, a sweet spot is 80 officials during the season. And at the start of the year, we lose a few. They'll go and work something else. But we tend to pick up a lot of officials throughout the season. And right now we're at 80 officials, about 100 teams. And that equates to about 1,500 hockey games throughout a regular season. With COVID, we definitely had some shortages and a lot less officials to pull from, which equated out pretty fairly. My role with them, about 7 years ago, they hired me to be the referee supervisor for the association, and we had one additional person that supported the officials group that was a scheduler. And that scheduler at the time used to self-assign, so any official could pick up any game they wanted at any point in time. And so when I stepped in, my role was to create the infrastructure, set a board, establish levels, and then get the right officials working the right levels.
And just out of curiosity, Krissy, how many ice rinks or how many sheets of ice on any given night is WHAM operating out of?
The majority of our games are on Saturday and Sunday nights after the youth sporting events around here. So unfortunately, we could be at 10 rinks. Even more on a Sunday night, all between 5 and 8 p.m. So it pulls on a lot of our officials, especially when they're preparing for work. So Sundays are challenging. It could be a lot of ice arenas, and we're spread across the entire metro of the greater Minneapolis and St. Paul area. So we do have some games probably 20 minutes outside the cities, which is hard to get officials at, but we've somehow juggled and picked up officials in those outskirt areas, which has been helpful. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Kevin, you've been around for a long time. You've done a lot of different things in a lot of different roles, including your state supervisor, assigned, American League, Olympian, everything else for 30 plus years. During your time involved in the sport and officiating, what are some of the things that have changed as far as the assignment process, and what are some of the things that maybe hasn't gone as well or has gotten a little bit worse over the years, and what are some of the things that might be a little bit better?
So I'm one of the guys that came in through those in-person postcard phone calls, meeting swap-a-ramas where the games were given out in person, either monthly meetings. You'd sit down, the assigner would come in and say, okay, here's what I got available. And it would be it was very much of a an in-person I can take this, and if you can partner me up with this person, we can drive out to that. The nice thing about that was it established kind of the personal connection to the assigner, so they knew, hey, you're willing to go here if I can pair them up with somebody else and they can do a carpool, right? Or hey, he's gonna be out of state traveling over here this weekend, I can catch him on his way back or something like that. So there was very much of a kind of that personal relationship or that one-to-one that you had with the assigner. That part of it kind of disappeared when we went to automation, right? So I think going to automation and using the online systems and all has made the job easier for the assigners. I don't want to give the impression that the job is easy, because it's not, right? But as far as being able to react to changes from the youth hockey organizations quickly, that certainly going to online systems allows them to do that in a much more urgent and expeditious manner. But to me, that's almost built up like an artificial wall, right? It's that technology barrier that sits between the signer and the official. It's easy to kind of point a finger and say, oh, that went into my spam folder, or I didn't get it, right? Or, oh, I forgot to press send, right? Something that we can say, well, it wasn't my fault that, I didn't get the assignment, or I was late to the assignment, I didn't know about it. So that, that kind of takes away that personal connection back into the assigners. One of the other things that I think is kind of a universal truth is when you get into these different systems, especially if you work in different leagues, you've got multiple calendars to maintain. So if you think about your work calendar, your family calendar, and then you throw in, 2 or 3 different scheduling system calendars, that's a lot of calendars to maintain. And unless somebody's really being on top of all of their calendars, it's easy to get to the point where you may get an assignment in an online system where you're blocked somewhere else, but you forgot to block that particular system. The other thing that's been kind of disturbing a little bit in the past, I would say the past year, maybe 2 years with COVID, is that some officials have learned to game the system. So they understand, okay, if I don't take games, within the normal acceptance range, then all of a sudden clubs get a little bit more anxious and they start offering premiums for the games. And somebody might say, you know what, I'm available, I can take this game, but if I sit on it for another 5 days, I'm going to make an extra 20 or 25 bucks. And that's kind of disturbing, right? That's kind of like, are we in it for the right reasons? And we're really we make the assigners' jobs that much more difficult and put that much more stress on them. So, good and bad, right? I like the personal connections from kind of the old school. And again, the assigners' jobs have kind of become less stressful, a little bit easier when you don't have COVID and ref shortages with the automation. But there's that personal connection that gets lost. So there you go.
Okay, fantastic. And this is next question is kind of sort of for both of you, but I'll start with Krissy. But what would you identify as kind of sort of being 2 or 3 of the main qualities of a game assigner that are most important as we relate that back to the development and the opportunities for officials to improve our retention rates?
Otis, you mentioned this one quite a bit, is that personal connection. And I think the number one thing that successful assigners have done is built a relationship or a rapport with officials. And it starts with your kickoff meeting in the fall, talking about process or how's the best way to communicate with one another, filling out that online system as the best ability as possible. So building that rapport and then seeing what the patterns are. So schedulers will observe patterns from the officials, and then we'll also pick up patterns from the scheduler. So we just happen to say we have a 30-day scheduling requirement in our location. We have to have our schedules out 30 days in advance. If it's shorter than that, that's a scramble. It takes a phone call. It takes that connection. The second thing is that timely communication. It's if there's a text message or an email or phone call, it has to be responded to within a certain time frame. And that's an expectation that we put on the assigner as well as on our officials. You can't just ditch a game an hour before. It has to have criteria 2 days before, 48 hours before, and if possible, a week before, so that it's more time for that assigner to find a replacement. Those are the 2 biggest ones for me, is building that rapport, communication, and especially with our newer officials. Okay,
Otis, your thoughts on some additional qualities?
So I'll go at it in 3, and it's kind of from perspective of the supervisor, right? One is the assigner to be willing to take chances and challenge officials, right? So especially in the past year or 2, where COVID and the referee shortage has really created some opportunities for folks that we can move along, right? And so the assigners have to be able to say, you know what, that guy that's worked the that official that's worked, mostly the 10Us. Let's challenge him or her and let them work the 12U, right? You know what? They end up shining, and all of a sudden, they find out that they're pretty good at 12U, and then we can challenge them with 14U. So yeah, take the chance and challenge the officials. Be willing to listen to feedback from others. It's kind of in that same vein, right? So if there's a popular opinion on an official, good or bad, let's listen to them, right? Hey, this guy or girl has been working a lot of the 10Us. I think they're ready to go. I've seen them in 4 or 5 games. The assigner should take that chance, right? And whether it's from like a state supervisor or a local referee in chief, or just the officials in general, be willing to take that chance. Next one on here is spread the wealth, right? So there's the officials, and Krissy kind of talked about understanding patterns, right? And when you get to the situation where there is, a game that comes in late and it needs to be covered, there's some go-to people, right? I know if I call this person, I know they're going to be available to take it. And that's a security blanket, right? But we got to be able to understand, are we using that security blanket too much, right? Hey, you know what? Let me try some of these other people, because now my list of go-to that I know is 10 might grow to 12, 13, 14, and I might be creating more opportunities for people. So spread the wealth. And then the other one on here is really not towards the officials, the assigners, not towards the officials, but the assigners towards the organizations. And to say, establish that credibility and trust with the organization, so that when they do see a new face out there, that they're not worried and going, oh, we haven't seen this person before, right? They might be kind of saying in the background, but if that relationship and trust is there to say, yeah, it's a new face, but based upon the people they've been sending me before, I'm confident this person's gonna do the right job. So the kind of trust with the organizations, so that you can send in new officials.
Look, that's a great point, and I think it's such a fine balance between providing that opportunity and challenging that official, which is the same thing. It's no different than a player. A player who gets challenged by their coach and all of a sudden, maybe moves up to the power play or penalty kill from being a third line winger, and gets those opportunities. That's a big thing for a player. And it's the same thing for younger officials, especially, is to get that opportunity. But at the same time, we have an obligation. We want to set them up for success. So there's a balance that comes into play there that I think is really kind of sort of one of the biggest challenges that they face, and is a good transition for my next question for Krissy to a certain extent, is what do you see as the biggest challenge for the game assigners, and how do you feel, or from your experience, what have you done, or what have you suggested to the assigners that you've worked with to best be able to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, it ties to that opportunity, but also not knowing your officials and putting inexperience on the ice with inexperience. That's been the biggest challenge, is knowing you have 2 possible brand new officials going on to skate a game, and that's scary. That's scary for them, and especially when they get in the locker room and they talk about it. So what we have done to overcome this is we do a combination scheduling. So one spot is always going to be a certain level, and then the second spot is going to be a lower level. So you will never have 2 lower level officials on that same game together, if at all possible. And then for our brand new officials that come in, their first 3 games is a mandatory mentor shadow on the ice with them. So the biggest mistake I see is that we're putting officials on the ice in combinations that are not successful to the teams or to the officials. And then they get really scared for the second time they go on the ice. So we do the best we can with scheduling and the mentor program to make sure it is safe and it's comfortable before those training wheels essentially come off.
Okay, and I think another point there, and it looks like we lost Otis for a second. He'll be back on in a second here, but you talk about setting things up for success, and it's not only the officials, but we're also trying to attempt to set the games up for success, because we want the game to be successful. We want capable and qualified officials, and one of the things that has always driven me nuts is the premise that well, we can only use the 3 official system at the highest levels or at the higher levels, right? So now you take an official who doesn't necessarily have that much experience, and you're putting him or her into a brand new system as a referee or as a linesman or as a referee, especially at a higher level that they're already challenged at, that they haven't necessarily worked before. And I'm not sure that that's really setting up either the game and or the officials for success. And that's certainly a challenge, and certainly something that we want to take a look at down the road as well. While we're waiting for Otis to get back here too, I guess my next question for you then is Krissy, what are some of the biggest mistakes that assigners make? And it kind of sort of ties into what you've already talked about, but when the assigners do make those mistakes, how does it impact the game? And ultimately, how does it impact our development of officials? And ultimately then, getting back to the crux of the thing, which is the retention rate.
Yeah. Being in the WHAM supervisor role the past 7 years, if officials are on the game and it does not go well, I will typically hear by the end of the night, and I will hear from both the officials. I will also hear from the coaches and the teams and the managers, and it's something didn't go well. How can we do this better next time? And when I reach out to the scheduler and talk about, was this a stretch? Were you trying to get somebody into the game? What happened here? Because a lot of that has to do with the scheduling, who's on the ice together, or were they levels that shouldn't have been out there working together. I really find the biggest mistake is when we're not following the procedures of combination schedulings and having mentors out there, and getting officials assigned to the right level as well. We have all varieties of abilities on the ice, and there's a right place for each person. There's a right time to use self-assign on a scheduling software tool as well, but I feel like it can be abused very quickly by assigners, just throwing the games out for anybody to grab. And then again, that becomes a really big headache for both the players and the teams and their safety and what's going on during their game. And then for the board, the officials, the association on how to correct it. And those are successful criteria for schedulers. I've gone through 3 schedulers in that WHAM association because of the first one with doing the self-assign process, and then the second assigner was ready to retire and go on to something else. And we fortunately had a second person learning from him over the 2 seasons prior. So he was ready to step in and fulfill this season, which was really nice. So a lot of our schedulers here in Minnesota have deep tenure and have been doing it for a really long time. They have their practices, best practices, and they have their rhythms. Not having somebody as a successor is also scary. I mean, when you're scheduling 6,000 or 10,000 games in a season, all by yourself, we tend to forget about how to do the mentor program correctly, or how to do that combinations, and not able to build that rapport. So I appreciate the, take 2,000 games and have somebody else take a portion and work through that together and build our association up for success versus a lot of complaints.
Very good. And Otis, welcome back. And just in time here, because the next question for you is you always kind of sort of gained that reputation or been characterized as that low maintenance guy. And I've talked to a lot of assigners and know a lot of them that have worked with you over the years. And regardless of what the level, you were the guy that was low maintenance as the official, and that one of the go-to guys. And what was it that kind of sort of, from the officials' perspective now, what was it that allowed you to gain that reputation? And what advice would you give to officials to earn that same type of reputation and recognition to hopefully have some better opportunities?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a good title to have. So I'm appreciative of that. Yeah, so I think it wasn't anything that I intentionally did, but as I kind of like reflect back on it and go, well, how come that's true? I think it was because it was a respect for the job that they do, and understanding that they're not for me only, right? they don't work for me. They work for the organization. They work for the league, right? They're putting the product on the ice. And that they are a very key stakeholder in my career, right? Assignors can make me or break me. And so it's better to be on the good side of an assigner. You know, if you are there, if you're the go-to person, if you are available, if you're willing to travel, then you're taking those games with the hope that a little, you know, goodwill now might pay off into something in the future, right? And so I think it was always just approached with that, right? To have the respect. There's obviously a love for the game in there. That kind of goes without saying. The key on that is availability, right? So when I was working, I did officiate a little bit when I was playing, but most of my officiating was done after my playing days were over. So I was available a ton. And that's kind of a big deal. And I always kind of step back and whether it's professional or whether it's hockey or as a player or as an official, just say, okay, there's lots of people out there that are competing for the job. So if everything else is equal, what are the little things that I can do that will set me apart, right? And can I do those types of things? And maybe it's taking those, you know, taking that 7:30, 6 o'clock game on a Saturday morning. It's the U10 game that's 20 miles away because nobody else wants it, right? And so when it comes down to postseason assignments and an assigner's looking at this going, you know what, Kevin took that 6 o'clock game on Saturday. Everything else is equal. You know, there's the little difference maker. As far as advice to officials, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? But it's being maniacal about keeping your online calendars up to date. Right? I think assigners get very frustrated when they give you a game, you know, something comes in, whether it's late or whether it's a block early, right? And to say, I got somebody who can do this, and they send it, and all of a sudden they get the rejection back, and to say, oh, I forgot to update my calendar, right? So that's a big turnoff for assigners. So keep our online calendars up to date. There's a balancing act between being low maintenance and being invisible. Invisible is not a good thing. Low maintenance is. And I think the invisible part is making sure there's kind of a heartbeat between you and the assigner. Even if that kind of communication, that outreach to the assigner starts off maybe as a negative one, kind of figuring out how to end that in a positive way. Right. So if I get a call back, let's say I'm being called out of town on work and I have to give back the weekend or something like that, I might call up an assigner and say, hey, John, you know, I'm being called out of work or called out of town on a weekend. I got, you know, 3 games to give back to you. Right. That's kind of delivery of bad news. But let's follow that up with, you know, hey, what can I help you do? Right. Do you need, you know, can I make some phone calls and find somebody? Do you have other games you want me to fill during the week? Right. So turn that into, it's not just boom, here's your problem, but I'm giving you a problem, but I'm also offering how to help as well. So I think there's some goodwill there. For experienced officials, I would also say, and this kind of goes to the goodwill thing, is let the assigners know you're willing to work as a mentor, right? Whether that's formally or that's informally, to say, hey, I've got some time this weekend, or, you know, next weekend, I'd love to be able to work with some younger officials and help them out. Have you got any mentor games for me? That's a good thing. And then last thing I would say is, kind of take a step back, and Krissy mentioned it earlier on about patterns, right? If you take a step back and say, what have my interactions been with an assigner? And are they positive? You know, when I'm interacting, is it good news? Is it bad news? Am I always turning back games, you know, a week after getting them? Am I always giving back games with the excuse of I didn't update my calendar? And to say, are there patterns there that I need to break to make it easier on myself and make it easier on the assigner? So there's your pieces of advice.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. And we actually got a couple of really good questions here from the audience. So Krissy, this first one's going to be for you. If we do not get assigned to work as a level 1 official in the first year, should we reapply as a level 1 official in the very next season, or can we apply for level 2 officiating based on previous skating ability and experience? What do you advise or recommend with filling out the application in the subsequent year? And thanks in advance for the response.
My recommendation would be to go to level 2 personally. I would recommend that because you're going to get a different criteria of learning materials, and you'll be challenged a little bit more with the rule knowledge. Even though you didn't get the opportunity to skate games, you still get that rule knowledge and application in a little bit different curriculum. And then after you skate a few games, my goal would be that you'd get at minimum 10 to 20 games in your next season, is getting that relationship with the scheduler, getting your foot in the door with that local association, trying to get a minimum of 10 to 20 games the next season, and then you can build on that knowledge. And then your next year is going as level 3, which is even better, even more in-depth knowledge into what we're doing and why we're on the ice.
Okay, some great advice there. And for Kevin, how does USA Hockey expect to develop officials for a higher level of play if only the same senior officials get these games? What a fantastic question. And I think a big part of what we deal with on a daily basis. What do you think?
Yeah, so that kind of gets to that good old boys network that I talked about earlier, right? And having assigners operate out of their comfort zone. We got to recognize that the stress that the assigners are under, especially, we don't know the conditions in which the games come in, right? If they're a late ad for an assigner, and the assigner says, you know, I've got 24, 40 hours before game time, they're gonna go to their network, right? Their go-to network. We need to get them to expand their network. So this ends up being that something that as administrators, right, as supervisors, as referees and chiefs, we have to go back to the assigners and say, we need you to operate out of your comfort zone, right? That network that you've built, that's 10, 12, 15, however, that needs to, you know, go 1.5 times as big or twice as big. And we need to follow that up kind of by measurement, right? So we talked earlier on about the benefits of the online systems and all. One of those is we're able to use data to measure, right? So we're able to say, you know, slice and dice the data and say, for games that came in with less than 48 hours, how many different sets of officials are getting that data? And then to say, okay, here's our baseline, and I need to see that grow. And then we can see that as time marches on. I think that's one of the things that probably will be coming next season in the task force, is a little bit more oversight into creating opportunities for officials so that they can work those next level games. If for anybody that's kind of been able to sit down and chat with me in the stands and all, I was talked about an officiating pipeline, right? So those officials that we have working the 10U games this year are going to be the ones that are working the 14Us and 15Os and 16Us in a couple of years. And if we don't get those people to have experience, then they're not going to be ready to work those games. And if we don't have that full pipe of officials willing to work or ready to work the 14s, 15s, 16s, that's tragic, right? And so in order to keep that pipeline full, we need to have people coming in and getting games, like Krissy was talking about. If you didn't work any in the first season, we got to get you working in the second season, and then spreading the wealth so that you're ready to move up. You're challenged. You're ready to take on those other games. So yeah, short line is we got to use our data and our metrics to be able to make sure that we're spreading the wealth.
Yep, fantastic. And I think you know, one of the comments in the chat area there is just talking about using the lesser experienced officials as lines at some of those higher levels that get some experience, and that's a great point. And I think that's certainly a way to go from a development standpoint. But I'm going to offer another suggestion is and as I alluded to before, why are we waiting till the highest levels of youth hockey to implement the 3 or the 4 official system, and especially the 3 official system? Now let's take that 10-year-old or that 12-year-old, 13-year-old level 1 official, okay, and just think about a natural progression. Is that official starts out working lines at the 10U or the 12U recreational level, okay, in the 3 official system. The referee in that person is the 2nd year kid, the 14 or 15-year-old that's in his 2nd year, and he or she goes from working lines the first year, and all of a sudden now the 2nd year they get, or at the end of the first year, maybe he starts refereeing some 10U games and gets some experience. And then the 2nd year comes back and now he's refereeing some 10U and some 12U, and the new official, and he's mentoring the newer official on the lines. And the 3rd year he comes back and now all of a sudden he's lining 14s. He's refereeing 14 rec, you know, and progressing along a natural progression where that first step from each step that he makes in that process, or he or she makes in that process, that first step is getting that experience as the lines person, and then moving on and transitioning to be a referee at that level and mastering those levels before they take that next step. So I would once again challenge our groups out there. And I know that there's a severe shortage of officials in a lot of areas. But it breaks my heart to hear that there's level 1 officials out there that don't get games. Okay. And the reason they don't get games is they don't feel that they're ready to, in some cases, they don't feel that they're ready to step into the competitive world of what youth hockey is nowadays. Well, maybe that's where taking that 3 official system and moving it down to the lowest levels gives them that opportunity to get some experience as a linesman real quick and follow that progression, and is constantly giving them new challenges. Everything that we go from there. So just a thought on that process. And you know, again, I think it's time we're going to go and we're going to address the elephant in the room. And that's the assigner fees and what they're getting paid. And just based on the poll question real quick, I think it's pretty safe to say that number of what an assigner gets is roughly, the average is maybe, let's say it's $4 per game. Well, USA Hockey recommends or basically estimates there's roughly 2 million games played each season in the US. 2 million youth hockey, USA Hockey sanctioned games played in the US. At $4 a game, that's $8 million going from the youth hockey players' pocket into the assigners' pocket. Okay, and that's just the youth and adult and the USA Hockey sanctioned stuff. So that being said, I guess my question for you, Kevin, is how much of that does and should impact the expectations we then have of the assigners, and to serve the game and not only serve and putting officials out on the ice that they're getting that $4 for, but also making sure that they're serving the game in regards to the officiating development and making sure that officials are getting that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a good point, and I like the word that you're using there, Matt, about serving, right? Because the assigners really have kind of 2 masters in this whole thing, right? The youth hockey organizations that pay them, and then the officials that they serve, right? So with the money that the youth hockey organizations pay them, there's the expectation that you're going to put on a crew that's qualified, they're trustworthy, and they're appropriately skilled, to work that level of game, whether it's a 10U or an 18U, right? But on the other hand, this assigner's got the kind of the responsibility to the officials and the officiating organizations to develop and challenge and build the officials there. So it's very much of a balancing act, right? And that's where that level of trust to be able to say, okay, you're gonna pay me money, right, to get you, and I hesitate to say the best crew, right? Like people are maybe kind of react on that. But the honesty is, if somebody's paying me $6 a game, to staff a 12U game, I'm not going to be able to reach out and get the guys that are working juniors or college or pros, right? But so that would be my best crew, right? I'm not going to be able to get those people. What I'm going to be able to get are people that are qualified and skilled to work that level. And those might be, for a 10U or a 12U, those might be officials that are 14, 15 years old. And so there's that balance, right? To say, I'm going to give you a quality product that's on the ice, but at the same time, I'm going to challenge some other officials there. The assigners are a service-based, or, taken as a bunch, the assigners are a service-based organization. They provide officiating scheduling services out to the organization. So there is some expectation, right, that the quality that's put on the ice is going to be as good as can possibly get. And during times like COVID, right, when we have the referee shortages, I think the key to this is open and honest communication between the youth hockey organizations and the assigners. We've had situations where, it'll be a Wednesday and our assigners will have turned the world upside down trying to find officials, but they just can't because officials are spread thin. They can't break up other crews, and they'll have to get out in front of get to the other organizations. And we say, if you're going to staff with one official, you need to let them know well in advance so that they don't show up and the coaches go, what do you mean I only have one official, right? So there's some expectations to say, right? Because in that situation, if I'm only showing up with one official, they're going to go, well, what am I paying you for, right? But if we're saying, here's what we did, we turned the world upside down trying to find officials, this is the best I can do for you. That open and honest communication, I think, helps to strike that balance between what the organizations can expect for the funding money, for the money they're paying, and what the officials can expect as far as the assigners helping them out.
Oh, great point. And Krissy kind of sort of taking that next step in that thought process, and recognizing that the recent survey, we did a retention survey, and I think most of the people that are regulars know that we've been following this pretty closely. But we recently did a retention survey and duplicated what we had done back about 16 years ago. And that survey, once again, reiterated the number one reason officials leave our game is still local politics and the lack of opportunity. Okay, and yet we hear that the people that probably the assigners that have the biggest influence on the environment that is created for that youth hockey official. And I understand that there's a culture thing, and we'll get to that in a second, but the assigner really has an impact in terms of the environment that official has and to be successful as an official in their development. So knowing that they're making, they're not volunteers, they are making some decent money in some cases, some more than others. And I know that there are still some volunteers that are out there. But again, we go back to how much of an impact do we have in terms of being able to expect the assigners to follow best practices and hold them accountable for doing so, in order to basically develop and advance officials and provide them the opportunities where we can impact the retention rate a little bit.
Yeah, I feel that this really falls on the officiating board or the association board for holding accountable, because if nobody's holding or talking to that scheduler, we've lost 20%, we've lost 30% of our officials. Again, they're leaving our association or they're quitting altogether because they didn't get opportunities. The only person that provides that statistic to them is that local supervisor or board. And setting the criteria, we need to have officials working a minimum of 10 games throughout the season, and that assigner needs to do everything in their power to make that happen. If that's not happening, I've strongly urged other associations. So I've sat on youth boards as well to say, we have a number of officials that didn't get games. We need to split some of the workload and give a chunk of these games to the mentor coordinator. We need to teach somebody else how to do the system so that we can make sure this pool of officials gets the learning opportunity and they're getting assigned to the games, opportunity. And if it's not happening, that crew of people holding this assigner accountable has that power.
Yeah, no question. They're the customer. And I think that's a big part. And I know that the task force that's been appointed that most of you are aware of is going to take a serious look at how the affiliates and how local youth hockey clubs can do a better job of partnering with the assigners to ultimately create that environment. Again, some great questions coming from the audience tonight. And this is probably my 20th Zoomcast. And I'm not sure that we've had as many good questions come in as we have tonight. Another one for you, and Otis, I'm going to direct this towards you. Speaking of the retention rate, we all know it's because of how poor the culture around youth sports has become, and officials aren't coming back because of hostile coaches, parents, players, plus the assignment processes I just mentioned. What measures, techniques are assigners and supervisors in your areas taken to help curb the abuse of officials? In other words, how do assigner supervisors in your area have the backs of the officials?
Yeah, so this is a really difficult one, right? One of the things that came out recently, and we talked about this in the Connecticut Hockey Conference, is the local affiliate in our area, having some accountability for the teams and the spectators, right? There's some, and this is where I think you were going, and Krissy was going with like a cultural change, right? Is that the game has got to be kept positive for everybody, and that includes officials, right? So officials have to be viewed as a partner in a game and not a necessary evil, right? And I think right now we are a necessary evil because we have to get paid. The games can't happen without the officials. So let's pay them, let's get them out there, right? And because we're paying them, there's the expectation that there's a certain amount of abuse they should take. That's not true, right? That the officials are out there. Yes, they're getting paid, but they are part of the game, right? And they need to be treated as partners in the game. So part of it is on the youth hockey organizations to ensure that the officials have kind of a safe environment, right? And USA Hockey put in place, I think it wasn't this most recent rule book, but the prior one, there was a position called spectator monitor, I think.
Mhm.
Right? And I think that was a good step in the right direction, but it takes a special kind of person to be able to monitor the stands and pick out, somebody in the crowd that's going to escalate and to say, you got to knock it off, right? And so I think they have to change from being reactive and saying, when something happens, I'm going to stop it, and being proactive to say, let's knock that culture out to begin with, right? And it's got to go back to the organizations. It's got to go back to the affiliates to say, how do we create a positive environment and a positive culture for the parents, right? Such that and I'm going to go to experience. This happened like a couple weekends ago. It's a 10U tier 4 game. It's 7-1, and there's about 2 minutes left to go. And I'm standing next to a father who's yelling at an official that's 14 years old that's down the ice, and he's going off on these officials. And I'm like, really? Like, you think this is productive? There's an officiating shortage going on here, and you think that this is productive? And he's like, well, he slashed the guy down there. And I said, so your view from 110 feet away behind a puck marked glass is better than the guy that's standing 6 feet away from it, right? And so there's that entitlement to say, you know what, that's not good for the game. Going after officials like that, whether the officials can hear them or not, is not good for the game, right? While the officials may not be able to, from 110 feet away, may not be able to hear that, it's the players on the bench, it's the brothers and the sisters that could potentially be officials later on that are going, why am I going to step on the ice if I'm going to take this? Right? And so I don't have the solution for you, right? But other than to say there's a partnership between the officiating organizations and the youth hockey organizations to change that culture, to say the officials are not fair game just because they're getting paid.
Yeah, no question, and it's such a huge thing, and a big part of the task force and what USA Hockey is going to try to do here is recognize that we're both in it for the common goal. We both want the same thing, and that is a positive environment for officials to be able to develop and enjoy the game and have a passion for the game of hockey. And we want a positive environment for players to be able to participate in a safe and competitive nature where they develop a love for the game and a passion for the game to be able to participate in it for life. It's the same goal. So obviously, I think a big part of what we're going to try to accomplish in the next 6 months, and actually the next few years, because culture change doesn't happen overnight, is really developing that partnership and acknowledging the fact that we're all in this together for the same common goal. So let's work together to make sure that we achieve that. Real quickly, next question from the audience I want to just take on here is Matt, I like your idea of younger officials working lines and wearing bands at lower levels, but is there budgeted money to fund this progressive idea? Look, Mark, that's a great question. And I'm gonna present it this way. I'm a firm believer, and I understand that there's some dynamics involved, but I'm a firm believer, okay, is that regardless of how many officials you put on the ice, the game fee should be relatively the same. There's the same number of offsides, especially when you start talking about 10U or 12U. There's the same number of offsides, the same number of icings, the same number of goals, the same number of penalties that occurred during that game, whether you have 2, 3, or 4 officials out on the ice. So why is there a huge surcharge for putting an additional official out on the ice from a team perspective? And I know that you also have to make it worthwhile for that official. But let's just say, for example, I know that there's squirt games in the United States that are played right now, 10U games, where the officials are making $60 in a 50-minute game. Each official, 2-official system, they're getting paid $60 for 50 minutes. Okay, so if you take that $120 game fee, okay, and instead of dividing it in 2, you divide it in 3, it goes down to $40. It's still $40, for a 50-minute game, that's $40 an hour. Okay. And there's not a 16-year-old kid in the United States that wouldn't kill to get paid $40 an hour to do something that they love. Okay. Because it beats the $8.50 or whatever it is that they're going to do getting flipping burgers at McDonald's right now. So even if we get more realistic, okay, and let's say that game fee is $50 for the Squirts. So you divide it with two officials, or let's say the game fee is $40. So it's $20 a head. Okay, now you work with the association to say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a more positive environment to develop our officials and to give more opportunities for the officials who are, by the way, also their players in most cases, to be involved in the sport in other ways. So we're going to ask you to not raise it another $20, but maybe we go up to $50. They kick in $10. Okay, so it becomes a $50 game fee, and you now split that, where the referee gets 20 and the linesman get 15. It's still more than what they would make flipping burgers or trying to get a part-time job doing whatever it is. So the younger, especially the younger officials, whether it's $15 they're getting paid for that game or $20, they don't really care. Sure, of course, when they get the paycheck, they love it, but they're trying it because they love the game of hockey and they see it as a way to make a few dollars and make a few extra bucks and get involved in the game the other way. So it doesn't have to be an exponential increase in terms of game fees to get the three officials out on the ice is what I'm saying, especially at the lower levels. And if the youth hockey club isn't willing to work with the officials group on a concept or on an initiative like that to create a better culture, and face it, the 10U kids love it. They think all of a sudden, oh my God, there's a referee out there with armbands on. I'm playing in a real hockey game, right? This is like the National Hockey League. So those benefits, and if they're not willing to work with the officials group on that, then that's the culture that we have to change. That's that partnership that we really need to tackle and really need to jump on. So final question, because we're approaching the top of the hour here. And I'm going to let both Krissy and Kevin take a run at this one. Is it inappropriate to ask an assigner, especially one that you do not know personally, to ask to work with another referee that have a good officiating partnership together? Actually, Krissy, why don't you take that one? Because we had one more come up here that I'll give to Otis.
I would definitely say it depends. It depends on if you've messaged this assigner multiple times in the past and kind of became a little bit of a pecker, of ear pecker, like trying to get that assigner's attention. But the great way to do it, or the best way to do it, is to send some praise about that other official. Say, hey, I worked with Otis and it was amazing. Hopefully I get another opportunity to skate with him, but it was a really wonderful experience. If you shed some positive light on it and you're just a really quick little blurb, that assigner will say, that was a good experience and these two probably did well, let's put them on together. But if you're constantly talking to that assigner or sending notes to them, then it's not appropriate.
Yeah. And the beauty of that too, Krissy, is that, you know what, if the officials are out there and they feel that they're working well together and they're having fun, the chances are the assigner is not getting complaints from the clubs on that either, on those two. Right. Because they're going out and they're doing a good job if that's part of it. Okay, question, Otis. Again, introducing the 2, 3, 4 official systems earlier and building experience. Let's talk about the 8U cross ice real quick and how that's affected the opportunities for new officials to develop. Is there any opportunity or is there any benefit really for, let's say, a brand new 13, 14-year-old official to go out and drop some pucks and get used to the movement and maybe make about $10 or something like that working the cross ice? And how do we get that into the clubs to allow something like that happen?
Yeah, so I have kind of mixed feelings on that. We tried to do that with our some of our state playoffs this year, and we ended up with experienced officials taking 8U games. And for my money, experienced officials, if they're already working 10U, to have them working 8U, there's nothing to be gained there. They should know how to drop pucks. They know how to skate. For the brand new officials to be able to say, yep, I'm going to drop pucks. I'm going to learn how to turn facing center ice. I'm going to learn how to trail play. There is value there, right? but I think there has to be a set of protocols and a set of standards that are established with the AU organizations to be able to say, this is how it's going to operate, right? After a goal, we are going to drop a puck, right? We are going to go to center ice, that the horn will blow every 2 minutes, right? That there is an opportunity for the officials to actually develop and not just stand on the ice and get paid. Getting paid is not a bad thing, but there's got to be actual development opportunities there. So in order to make it more valuable, I think there's a sets of standards. I think we build upon that AU cross ice standard document that I think is several years old, right? And be able to say, let's take that as the foundation, build it out, get everybody on the same page, and make sure that it is truly an officiating development opportunity, just like it's a player's development opportunity.
No, great point. And that would be the red, white, and blue cross ice officiating manual, which you can find on the website, usahockey.com, on the resources page, along with the rule book and stuff like that. So check that out. And I do think that it is an opportunity for us to, in the right atmosphere. And again, it should be an easy sell to hockey clubs right now, to youth hockey clubs, from the standpoint of creating some opportunities and doing some things that will help our culture a little bit. Okay, we are approaching the top of the hour here, so I need to do my obligatory plugs on some various things. Otherwise, BJ will fire me for the next time around. Real quick, the upcoming schedule. Tonight, we're talking about game assigners. We have 2 more sessions this week or this season before we're going to call it a wrap. But the next one coming up on March 29th is getting started. And it really is focused on the newer officials, the level 1 officials, in terms of how they get assignments, how to get going, helping them through the registration process a little bit. I'm sure that the topic of mentoring will come up, and some of the things that we can do as our more experienced officials to really help that next generation of officials not only get started, but then to have a positive experience to keep going. And then and Scotty Zelkin will be moderating that one. And then coming up on Tuesday, April 12th, BJ with his ever popular You Make the Call will be back and get things going with that one to wrap up this particular season with our Zoomcast. Just a quick reminder, follow us on social media, Twitter, the YouTube channel, where you can go back and watch any of our Zoomcasts on demand, and Twitter and Instagram and those types of things. BJ generally sends out a survey, and we certainly appreciate some continued feedback that we may get there. I want to thank our panelists, both Krissy and Kevin, tonight. Any final words of wisdom from the 2 of you? Krissy?
Keep your schedule up to date. Do the best job you can on the ice, and have a wonderful time. Enjoy the ride.
And Kevin?
Yeah, be available, keep your schedule up to date, and make sure it's all about fun, right? Because if we're not doing it for fun, we're not doing it for the right reason.
Fantastic. Well, once again, I'd like to thank Krissy and Kevin for joining us and taking times out of their busy schedule tonight. And want to thank all the participants and everyone that logged on tonight. I know it's not, I know there's a lot of things that you could be doing on a Tuesday evening, but for those that are with us every Tuesday, thank you very much. And for those that just joined us for this one, please feel free to go back and look at some of the previous Zoomcasts on demand on the YouTube channel. And also, we look forward to joining us again in 2 weeks with the next session. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. And for those that are still out there skating, hey, let's go out and let's finish the season strong. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Yep. Good night, everyone.